follow a similar process as we did the last webcast. We'll first of all give a brief introduction about A2K Technologies. Then we will give an overview of what Vault is, and then we'll look at the specific topics that you can use Vault for. And I'll leave some time at the end for questions and answers. And if you have any questions, just type them in as we go, and if I can answer it there and then I will, if I notice it, or what I'll do is I'll wait till the end of the webcast and we'll address them all one by one. Okay, so let's get started and just give a quick introduction and summary about A2K Technologies. So we're Australia's largest Autodesk reseller. We've got offices all across Australia, Sydney, Perth, Brisbane, Melbourne, as well as New Zealand and China. All the technical guys and sales guys are from industry, so we have first-hand experience in using the products from a practical point of view. And we offer a lot of support in terms of training, consulting work, and business development. So the range of products we offer, they're not just strictly restricted to the Autodesk range. We also offer all the Adobe products, Symantec, Citrix, and all the hardware as well that you need to get set up as a design team. So one kind of offering that I really like to point out is the one second in from the right-hand side here. It's called Global E-Training, and this is an excellent resource because you can sign up for online training. You get access to all the training materials for 12 months, and you can train when you get the time and when you get the chance, and you can really focus on the areas you want to focus on. And on Global E-Training, there's Vault training being launched recently, and it's really good as well. And of course, we do provide instructor-led training with A2K Technologies as well. Okay, so let's get into the main topics today, and we'll give an overview of what is Vault. So for people who aren't familiar with Vault, it consists of two main components. One is the web server, which is here on the left-hand side, or sorry, the server application, excuse me, and the client application. So the server, Vault server sits on the server, and the client sits on the workstation. When you want to get data and work on it, the client accesses data from the server, gets a copy of it onto the local workspace, and works on it on the local machine, while person A is working on it, person B, C, D, they can see that person A is working on a particular set of data. When they're finished working, they check it back in, and it goes back into the server. Each time data is checked in and checked out, a version is created. It's kind of pretty much like a snapshot. So it gives you excellent capability in terms of being able to roll back designs and also work in large teams. So there's some of the basics of the benefits of Vault. But if you wanted to look more at the details of what the basics of Vault is, I'd recommend you go onto our website, a2ktoechnologies.com.au, and there is a Vault webinar. And I've given a very good overview of Vault Professional, it was about a month ago, and we covered all the basics of Vault, what the benefits to the designer are, things like quick searching, how to copy designs, reuse designs, how to classify your files in terms of categories, and how to apply life cycles to a design. So today's webinar, what we're going to cover is, we're going to look at creating some users and groups. We'll also look at using labels. So labels are for taking a snapshot of a particular folder at a set point in time. We'll also look at automatic file naming. We'll then look at change order management. So engineering change management, how you can manage the who, what, why, when, and where a change in a design needs to happen. We'll also talk a little bit about the web client interface, as well as bill of materials management, and a bit about third-party Sharepoint integration. So before I jump into the software, what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about the Sharepoint integration first of all. So this is where you want to extend all your design data to the entire organization. So you spend a lot of time creating drawings, creating models, you may as well leverage those hours that you put in and get a return on them in terms of marketing, in terms of purchasing and procurement. So you want to share that data with people who are not in the design team. As I said, you want to give it to marketing, you want to give it to sales, maybe you want to give it to procurement. And integration with Microsoft SharePoint 2010 allows that. So for people who haven't been using SharePoint 2010, what it does is it allows you to set up a website that shares information with others. It allows you to manage documentation from start to finish, so it allows you to manage documentation across the entire enterprise. So this means if you can integrate your design data with this, it means that marketing can maybe use high-class renderings. You can share it with technical publications department, where they can create manuals based on your design data. And as I said, you can get a lot more value from your models and the designs that you have. The benefits of integrating Vault with SharePoint, it's really for enterprises that have SharePoint in there and Autodesk software. And as I said, it gives you that extra value from your design data. As well as integration with SharePoint, Vault's products integrate really well with Microsoft Office. So Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and Outlook. And in part one of this webinar series, I showed an example of how you can check in Excel files and check in PowerPoint files and so on. So it does offer a holistic project management solution. So imagine you're creating a design and you want to put in your specifications in there. You can put them in PDF format. Maybe you want to put in some calculations that the engineers did. That's your Microsoft Excel files you can put in. Maybe you want to put in your sales documents, such as your PowerPoints and presentations. So all of that can be integrated with Microsoft or Autodesk Vault. So in short, and I'm not going to kind of repeat what we did in the first part of this webinar series, but overall, Autodesk Vault allows you to manage the entire engineering process, and it documents, tracks, and stores your design decisions. So it gives you accountability and audit capability as well. So even if you're applying for ISO 9001, you can use Vault as a system to manage your changes, manage the quality of your designs, how you're tracking what changes happened, when, where, and why. And it also allows you massive increases in efficiency, because you can use Vault to change names on 50 parts in one hit. You can use automatic file naming. You can use rename and copy designs to allow you reuse existing designs and maintain all the links. So there's massive benefits, and most of those things that I mentioned I've gone over in part one of this webinar series. Okay, so if we jump into Vault, the Vault client. So for people who haven't seen the Vault client before, there's a nice layout to it. It's pretty much like Microsoft Outlook. So on the left-hand side, you can see all my folders and my projects that I'm working on. On the right-hand side, you can see the subfolder structures. And when I click on a part, it gives me an indication of the different revisions and versions that this design has gone through. So you can see there that it gives you a lot of data about your files. So for example, when I go into a part, I can see where that part is used. So I can see what assembly it's used in, when it was checked in by, who checked it in, if there was any comments there. And I can click on preview and it gives me a little view of the model file. Okay, so again, I kind of covered off all the basic introduction stuff in the first part of this webinar series. So what I'll do is I'll move on to that topic list that we looked at earlier. So the first thing on that list was how to create users and groups. So for example, let's say we're just setting up our Vault almost for the first time. So I want to create a group, and the way I do that is I go up to Tools and Administration, and I go into my global settings. And the group perhaps that I want to create is maybe for engineering. So when I click on groups, you can see that we've got one group in here already, which is office staff. So if I click on that, we can see that there's a group called office staff. The roles that they have are in here. So I can see that it's a document consumer and a document editor assigned to this group. And again, if I wanted to check what a document consumer is allowed to do and a document editor is allowed to, I can go back in here and click on roles, and I can click on document consumer, and it tells me what a document consumer can do. So that's quite a good way of checking what permissions people have. So let's go back in here to our groups, and we'll create a new group. This time we'll call it engineering. And I'll give the engineers document editor level 2, which will allow them to delete things if they want. Give them document manager level 1, which will allow them to do things like flow documents through a workflow. So maybe they want to go from work in progress to released, then they'll have permission to do that. And you can pick and choose what permissions you want to give people. Next thing I tell it is I want this group to access Vault. You pick which Vault you want it to access. And I can then add members to my group. Okay? So what I'll do is I'll just add the administrator at this stage and say OK, and then click OK. So that's an engineering group setup. So perhaps we've got some new engineers starting with us. So what I do is I need to create some user profiles for the new engineers that are working with us. So I'll click on New User, and the first name is going to be Ed, and the second name is going to be Engineer. And again, I can assign roles to the user level, but I wouldn't recommend this. I'd recommend creating your users and username, I'll call him E Engineer. I'd recommend assigning the permissions to the group levels, so that way as people come and go on the Vault, you can then just add them to a group and you don't have to be guessing which permissions you've given to different people. So I can go back into my groups, and I can say in my engineering group, let's add another user, and I can add Ed Engineer in here. Click OK, and OK again. Okay, so that shows you how to create users and groups, and how to assign users to groups, and also to give permissions to certain groups. Okay, so that's users and groups. Another really good benefit of Vault is the ability to create labels at different points in time. So for example, this signpost assembly here, or let's go to a different one, let's go to supporting framework. Okay, what I'll do is I'll right click and I'll get checkout. And what it's doing is it's getting a copy of the files, and I can say checkout, yep. Okay, getting the files from the server, putting them onto my local workstation so I can access them from Inventor. So again, I go to the folder that it's gone to, which is Virtual Summit and Supporting Framework. Okay. So let's say at a particular point in time, someone is working on this assembly. We're finished working on it, and we now want to give it to the client to review, and we want to maybe lock this design at a certain point in time. So what I'll do is I'll just check it in. I'll close the files and delete the working copy from my workstation. Click OK. And yes again. So when I go back in here, we'll refresh. It's checked in, and let's say this is a point in time, as I said, like an initial design review. We're working with our client. They said yes, they're happy with the initial model, and we want to save everything in this folder to this particular version. So the way we do that is we go up to Tools and we click on Labels, and that will open up another dialog box for us, and you'll see here that I can create a new label, and I can tell it that the folder I wanted to work on is Virtual Summit. Click OK. And the label name is, I'm going to call it Preliminary Design Review Accepted. I can put in comments accepted by client for preliminary development. Okay. So you can see here I've got a label. It's preliminary design review has been created, the date it's been created, and then I can click on close. So should I go into this, and let's say we're a week down the track, we want to get checkout again. So we'll just right click, get checkout. And let's say we want to work on the design. So we click OK, and we'll open it again in Inventor. Yes to all. And let's say someone comes along and they decide that some of this is all wrong. So they decide to delete a lot of it. We'll right click and delete with Frame Generator. And it takes a second to delete. So it's deleting all those members. I'll say yes, I want to check it out. So we've changed the design, and as well as that, we want to create a component in place. And we'd say we'll put it into the Virtual Summit folder. Call it something very original, like block. And yes, that all looks good. I'll put it here, and I'll ignore that for a second. And let's say we're just putting on a block component. Okay. So the whole point is I'm not really concerned about designing it. I'm just concerned about putting in another part. Okay, so I have another part put in, and you can clearly see that it's different. So I'll check in, and yes. Close all the files again. Yes. So when we go back to our vault, we'll refresh it. We'll see that we've added in an extra part. It's gone to this new version compared to the old one, and a lot of the framework has been deleted. Okay, so let's say we've been working on this and we've checked it in, checked it out lots and lots of times, and then the client comes back and they say, no, we want to roll everything back. And I'm saying, okay, that's an assembly. I've changed multiple parts in it. So we can roll back individual files, but maybe I want to roll back the entire folder. And that's where labels come in. So we go back up to our labels and we say, yes, restore, oops, wrong one. Preliminary design review, we'll restore that one because we can see the time that it was created. Yes. And it starts restoring all of those files. So it's a very good way of creating a timestamp on a folder for design work. So as I said, it's really useful from a project point of view. And what you'll see is there, it's rolled it back to a point in time where we haven't added in the block or we haven't deleted all the frame members. You can see it there. Okay, so that's labels and users and groups. The next thing is probably one of the most, in my opinion, one of the best features of Vault, and that's for automatic file naming. Okay, so let's say we want to go to create a numbering system. Okay, so I'm going to go into my Vault settings, and I'll go to behaviors, and let's give a look at numbering schemes. So down here in the bottom, we've got define custom numbering schemes. Click on define, and I'm going to put in a new one, and I'm going to call this A2K Tech Numbering Scheme. Cool. So I'll say new. So my first one, I'm going to put in a fixed text, and I'm going to call my fixed text A2K, and the fixed text is going to be A2K as well. So my next one then is going to be a delimiter. So my delimiter is going to be A2K dash. Click OK. And then the next one, let's put in maybe some sequential text, maybe auto-generated sequence, okay? So that's my part number, okay? So I'm going to put in my part number. It's going to be 6 digits long. It's going to be 0 padded, and it's going to increment up in steps of 1. Okay? So the other kind of things you can put in there are predefined lists. So maybe you had just certain numbers of departments. So, oh, sorry guys, just a technical issue. Okay, so maybe you had an electrical department, a mechanical department. So your predefined list might be -MECH for mech, -ELEC. And that's what you can do there with a predefined list. Or you can put in a workgroup label as well, which is really useful, or free text. So it can be as flexible or it can be as restrictive as you want it to be. Okay? So where was I? Let's see, we've got a fixed text, a delimiter, and we need an auto-generated sequence, part number, click OK. So I can click OK on that, and I can make it the active one here, and click Close. So let's say I want my supporting framework, and I want to rename all the files on this. What I can do is I can right-click, and I can say rename this assembly. And let's say next. Oops. Add files and supporting framework, frame. Let's add all these files. And let's say next. Okay, so it can pick up the children as well automatically. For some reason it didn't there. It normally does. So I can pick the numbering scheme I want to work with, and I want to work with the A2K Tech numbering scheme. Click Apply. Close, and I can tell it to update the part number, so it's going to give it a new name, and a part number as well. Okay, so when I click Finish on that, it'll work through it really quickly. So you're renaming 70 files here in one hit. It only takes a minute or so. And while that's going, I can see that, Paul, you've put in a question there, and I missed it, so apologies, but you've asked, are you able to view the files prior to performing a restore? So that's for the labels, I guess, and the answer is no. What you can do is, what I'll do is I'll just show you. You can see the exact files the way it was. It's the way they were. But what you can do is you can go back to the assembly. So for example, you go here to the signpost, and you can see what version or what revision and what changes were made back here. So if you knew that, for example, let's create a label very quickly in this folder. So we'll go Tools, Labels, and we'll say New, and we'll call it, let's go to our signpost folder. Label name, Test Review. Click OK, and close. As I check in and check out and edit that file, it's going to create a new version each time. So I know when I go to my labels up here that the test review was created at this date, at this time. So then I can go back and look along the history, and it'll tell me when this was last checked in and modified. So you'll have an idea of what you're rolling back to. Okay, hope that answers your question. Just going back again to the numbering scheme. Let's give a look at our virtual summit. And you can see our supporting framework and all our parts have been renamed per our new naming convention. Okay, so that's, to me, is one of the best time savers, because oftentimes you have to rename files, or you can go along and just give generic names as you're designing. Once you've finished your design, you can come along then and say, yes, I want to use my automatic naming convention, and it'll generate a list of sequential numbers. That way you don't have to go looking at master document lists and finding out which file is the next available number and so on. And it also allows you to deal with clients when you give a certain part numbering scheme and if you've finished your design and they come back and they say, well, actually, don't like the delimiter, can you change it please for me? And then straight away you can change it in a couple of hundred documents in one hit if you want. Okay, so the next thing on our list that we wanted to look at, we've looked at automatic file naming, which as I said is one of my favorite benefits of Autodesk Vault. Next one is change management. Okay, so let's say someone wants to make a change to this signpost assembly. They realize that there's a big section missing off the top of the signpost when we see here in our preview, and we need to change it. Okay, and we need to change it in accordance with a certain specification document. So what we can do is we can go to our change order list down here, and we can say new, and we can give it a change order number, and this number can be customized as well. So this is engineering change order number 2. I will call it the title of it, signpost or modification. Detailed description, section missing from assembly, please fix. And what you can do here is you can set a due date, so maybe I want it due by next Monday, so they'll have to work over the weekend. Records, I can add records if I wanted to, so if there was another file that's maybe a client request or something like that, I can add comments in here. I can also attach files, so maybe I want to attach a certain file. As I said, it has to be done in accordance with a certain specification document, so I can navigate to the PDF file that I want them to use, and I can attach it to this change order. Then I can say the routing, so I can give it a default routing, or you can modify that slightly. And you can see what users are going to be in that routing. At the moment, it's just the administrator, but I could have an engineering manager, I could have office staff, I could have whoever I want on that routing. And the next tab then shows me the status. So the status of this engineering change order at the moment is in the creation stage, because you can see it here, it's yellow. And as I move through from open to work to review, and at the review stage then it can be rejected back to open, or you can get to approved. Or if you wanted it from the work stage, you can fast track it to approved, to the manager, and then they can close it. So, whoops, don't want to save changes, yes. So, we've got ECO2 here. We can assign it to certain people, and then they can work on it. They can see what files they need to work on. So again, I forgot to actually attach the assembly file, so we could edit it. And we can say we also want to attach the assembly file. So signpost, open. So now they've got the model file, and they've got the instructions with it, and the comments to go on what to do with it. So I'll just save it again and close it. And when an ECO gets assigned to a certain person, you can see down here on the bottom left-hand side that it pops up in your work list. So it's very clear that someone has assigned a change order to you, the date that it was assigned, and its due date as well. So as well as that, we can set up email notifications such that when a change order is assigned to someone, we get an email sent to them telling them, hey, you've got to change a certain file, and so on. What they do then is they then come in and work on it, and then they can respond, and they can move it through the work process. And basically submit and force approval, click OK. And then when you get to that engineering change order, we look at the status. You can see that it's at the approved state, and then we can go on and close it. Okay, so respond and set effective that that change has been done, so we're happy with it, and it's closed. So it allows you to keep a record of what changes are on your task list, what ones are closed, what ones are finished, and it's really a very useful tool again. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to look at is bill of material management. So bill of materials are very important in a design and from a commercial point of view. Otherwise you'd lose money in terms of quoting and building a product. So let's go back to our framework down here again. And let's say I want to generate a bill of materials for this framework, and I maybe want to link it with ERP or an MRP system, which is engineering resource planning or manufacturing resource planning, or maybe something like SAP. So I can integrate it downstream with other systems. Or maybe I just want to manage my bill of materials within Vault. So the way I do that is I right-click on the assembly and I say assign item. And what an item is, it's like a representation. So perhaps I want to include in my bill of materials things like grease, maybe packaging, maybe some spare parts that aren't in my model. So I can have an item for an assembly, and then I can associate multiple files to that item. So what I've done there is when I go to my item master, you'll see we've got a whole lot of items created. And again, this is the numbering scheme that I've picked, and we can fully customize that numbering scheme. And what it does is, when we go to this item that we want to work on, which is our supporting framework, it gives us a little bit of information about that item. So it tells us the title of it, and it'll pull in things like other descriptions if we had here, like part number, maybe manufacturer's part number or supplier's part number. Go to the history, so when this item was used. We go to the bill of materials, and you can see here that it's given us each item that's involved in this assembly. So maybe I want to look at the part number as well, so I can customize the view. Give a look at, all fields and part number. That's on there already, isn't it? Okay. So what you can do is you can see the different fields that you can add in there. So maybe we want to put in our description. That'll probably give us a better idea of what we're looking at. Primary file name as well. That's probably useful. And click OK and close. And you can see there that it's fully customizable. We've got our description pulled in here, which tells us what it is. Primary file name, which is the same as our part number. So that's our bill of materials done. Let's say we've got our quantity in here in millimeters. Let's say we know that, let's scroll down and see if there's any part we can change. Okay, so let's say we want to change this quantity of this particular part number because maybe we need to add in extra sections of it. Or let's say customize view and give a look at what other fields we can put in there. Okay, so we can just cancel that again. Close it. Let's say we want to edit the quantity. So we can say instead of putting in the actual quantity, let's put in calculated quantity, and we can just modify it as we like. If we know that we need to have a little bit of run out here on this particular part for cutting and fabrication, for fitting tolerances, maybe we need to go to 1200, and we click enter. We can change our quantities here. And you'd see that it goes to italics once we change it. So we can look at a list and you can see that, yes, this is a modified value and not the actual model value. Okay? So you can also see what change orders are associated to items. And let's say we want to, it would save our changes there. Let's say we want to export this particular bill of materials. What we can do is we can go up here to File and Export. We can export that particular item as an Excel file, and it'll give us our bill of materials out in different formats. Or we can go to File, Export Items. And what that allows us to do is, no items to export. Let's select that. Using the Export Wizard, we can export out to different file formats for MRP and ERP systems. And that's quite a useful functionality as well. Okay, so we've looked at quite a lot in the last 40 minutes or so. So we've checked out what users and groups and how we can create and edit them. We've also talked about creating labels. We've talked about automatic file naming, engineering change management, and bill of materials. So the bill of materials is really a useful tool, as I said, because you can integrate it with your procurement system, and it allows you export all your manufacturing data to different systems in the business. Okay, so if we move back to our PowerPoint presentation, and what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about the Autodesk Vault web client. So what this does is, with Autodesk Vault Professional, you can access your Vault via Internet Explorer or Chrome or any of your internet browsers. So what you do is you simply type in the web address that's up on the top left-hand side. So your server name /autodesktc/ and then just press go. And it has to be on the local area network. Okay, so on the local area network, you can open up Internet Explorer, type in the server where your Vault lives, type in Autodesk TC, which stands for Thin Client, and it'll bring up this page in front of you. And then you simply log in using your standard credentials. So you tell us what Vault you want to work with, tell us your username, your password, and the server it's working on, and you can dictate whether you want read-only access or not. Okay, so by default, all the web clients are read-only access. But you can get another product called Microsoft Office. And what that does is it allows people access or check in and check out data who aren't using design data. Maybe they're just using Microsoft Word, maybe they're just using Excel, and they need to check in and check out data. So Vault Office allows you to check in and check out Office documents, and you can use the web client to check in and check out data. And what it does is it just gives you the same view as what we saw in the Vault client. So you can access all your folders, all the properties, you can see previews, see the state of files. And another thing worth mentioning is that if you choose to integrate with Sharepoint, it's the Autodesk Vault Thin client is what integrates. It's a very similar integration. Basically, you use your Internet Explorer client to get to Sharepoint, and it'll publish data from your Vault into your internet browser. So using the Sharepoint integration is read-only. It is only on Sharepoint 2010, not Sharepoint 365. And then you have all the standard functionality then in Sharepoint, like you can create as many unique Sharepoint lists as you would like. Each list can be then configured in terms of file extension, folder security, lifecycle state, and category. And you can also see the Vault change orders scoped by state, and as I said, it's read-only access. Okay, so the only way you can use check-in data using the Vault client is with Vault Office. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just take a little break for a second, and what I mean by that is we'll just get a little bit of feedback from people on how they're using Vault or their data management system at the moment. So I'm just going to launch a poll asking people how they currently manage their data. So you'll see a quick poll pop up in this screen in front of you. And if you just click on how do you currently manage your data, is it through Autodesk Vault, or maybe it's a Windows folder structure, or is it just separate people working on different workstations, or is there another file management system that you use? Okay, cool. So some of the people are using Autodesk Vault, and other people are using Windows folder structure. So that's interesting. The big thing with a Windows folder structure is, like, I guess it can be hard to find data. So in Autodesk Vault, you just switch back in here again. For example, if I want to find a certain file, I can search via all the metadata on a file. So I can search via revision, the name of the author, and so on. So for example, if I'm looking for PDF files, I can say look for all files where the file extension, I can see it there. We're looking at items, so files, and say maybe file extension contains PDF. Add that as a criteria, find now, and I'll find all the files that contain PDF, as well as things like the authors. So for example, let's look at some data here, where we'll customize the view and put in things like an author. Close. So you can see there that the author was N. Smith. So again, do the same thing. Let's give a look for find. Give a search for the author, contains value Smith, and I'll put it in capitals. Add, find now, and straight away it'll find all the files that this person was working on. Okay. Let's give a look back at our, there's another couple of questions on these polls to ask. So let's close that one for the time being, and let's launch the next one. And this one is just going to ask people, do you ever have issues copying designs? So let's say you have a big assembly, it's perhaps a truck, and you want to use 90% of the components again, but you need to change 10%. So what you would do is you'd copy the entire assembly. You'd copy up. Okay, so sorry guys, when I was showing the example on the last, I didn't realize the poll was still on the screen. So I'll do that again. We still have time to finish that. Okay, so if you just answer the poll that's on the screen at the moment, do you have any issues copying, reusing, or renaming existing designs? Then I'll close that poll, and we'll go back to looking at Vault as well. So as I was saying, if you've got an existing assembly, you want to reuse 90% of it, then oftentimes using a Windows folder structure, you can lose links if people don't know what they're doing. Then you have to use Design Assistant to rename things, and that can be quite cumbersome, quite slow, and it's a lot quicker using Vault for that. So what I'll do is I'll just close this poll, and what I'll do is I'll just show you the search functionality very quickly again in Vault. So when you can search, you can go to the Advanced section, and we can say, I want to look at all the files where the author contains Smith. Add that as a search criteria, click Find Now, and it'll show me the 49 files that this person has created. So it's a very quick and easy way. I could also report on that data quite easily as well. So maybe I wanted to just see the file table. So let's open up that and say OK. And that will generate a report on all those files, so I can see what's happening, what category those files are in, when they were working on them, what state they're in, whether they're work in progress or finished, and so on. Okay, just to put the last poll up on the screen as well. It's just a general question, and it's asking people, do they have a formal workflow process in place for design data? And what I mean by this is, when someone is working on a project or a drawing, do they just sign it off and check it themselves? Or do they flow that document through to a senior engineer for checking, who then signs it off and then moves it on to the manager for approval and final sign-off? Okay? So again, it's a very useful feature in Autodesk Vault. So again, most of the people say sometimes, which I guess is probably a time constraint, and depends on what model people are working on. If people know what they're doing, oftentimes they just sign off on the drawing themselves. But it can lead to quality issues, because a lot of the time it's difficult or hard to sign your own spot your own mistakes. And it's also important from an accountability point of view that using a enforced workflow, you can always guarantee that the manager has checked off, and they can't turn around and say, well, I never saw that drawing, I never checked it, because you have it on record in your vault that yes, they did check it off. And you can see here that this particular assembly is work in progress. I can change the state, and I can move it maybe to released because I've got the rights. We can set it up in Vault such that only the manager can set it from work in progress to released. Okay, so I need to release some of the parts there, but again, I'll just do this with a part. Okay, let's do the framework layout part. Because the reason that didn't work is because it wasn't in an engineering category, so I hadn't assigned the life cycle to that particular file. So you can see there that the framework layout has gone from work in progress to released. And the reason I couldn't transition the assembly here is because certain parts of the assembly, so for example, we'll go down here and we'll release all the parts of that assembly. We can right-click first of all, and we'll say, well, not right-click, we'll go up here and say change category. We'll make it to the engineering category, click OK. So you can see there that little glyph here on the right-hand side shows me that it's in the engineering category. What I can then do is, they're all work in progress at the moment. I can change the state of those, and I'll release all of those parts first of all. So you can see now that all those parts are released. Then that will allow me to go back into my assembly, and I should be able to release the assembly here then. One or more files cannot change to the specified state due to errors or restrictions. So revision A2K. Oh, okay, so there's obviously some assembly here that I've missed, but that's the issue. It's not released. It's still work in progress. So what I could do is I'll right-click and I'll open it up. And just show you another useful feature inside Vault. So when this is opening up inside an inventor, we can go to the Vault tab here, and it'll tell us what parts are released. So you can see here they're all in the locked state because I've them released. So if I want to edit them, I'll have to transition it back to work in progress. And it's this assembly here is not released. So A2K-123433.iam. So we need to find that. So what I'll do is, let's just open that. And I'm just going to copy the file name. So that way then I can search for it in Vault if I can't see it. Okay, it looks like that it looks like it is released here, so could be some issues with that, but maybe there's a second file referenced in it. So let's give a look and say file name contains this, add, find now. Okay, and it is telling us it is released, so there is some, okay, so the issue is that there isn't an item number assigned to it, so I've got items assigned to everything else and the items are released, so that's what's causing the issue there. It's down here in the item master. Okay, so we can, at least you can get the idea that you can assign workflows to your files and you can get accountability and so on. Okay, so let's go back to our PowerPoint again and just review what we've discussed today. We've talked about creating users and groups. We've talked about creating labels. We've also talked about automatic file naming, change order management. We spoke about the web client interface, which allows us access to Vault through Internet Explorer and Internet browsers. And we've also got bill of material management, which we saw there. That allows you export bills of materials. So again, if you want to integrate your design system with a manufacturing resource planning system or an ERP system, then I'd recommend using the bill of materials functionality. It really is a bit more investment up front to get a lot of benefits downstream from your models. And at the start of the webcast, we talked about Sharepoint integration. So that's for integrating your design data with other parties across the organization. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll leave some time for questions and answers. So if people want to write into the question box on the bottom of GoToMeeting, or sorry, GoToWebcast, just punch in the questions and I'll try and work my way through them and answer them as best I can. Okay, so Ewan has asked the question, Vault keeps track of lengths, etc. for bill of materials. Is there a way to automatically add a margin of error? Like, I know I need 100 meters of particular pipe or wire or whatever, but I want a 5% margin. I would drive from Vault or Inventor or AutoCAD Electrical, etc. Yeah, no, there is a couple of different ways you could do that, Ewan. What you could do is you could use it inside an Inventor or the CAD application, and that's probably the best way to do it. So what you could do is, one way would be going into Vault and going to your item master. So let's scroll down here and let's look at our supporting framework. When you look at a bill of materials here, you can manually change it. So that's how you would allow for an extra bit of slack or material slip in here. So you can manually change it. Say, let's say we wanted a bit of run out here of 25 mil, so 50. So when I'm ordering it, I'll order it for my bill of materials in Vault. It'll call up 1.15 meters. But when I go to my drawing, the drawing will show that there's 1.125 meters required. So you can see that way that you can over order from your bill of materials, but still manufacture to the correct size based on your drawing. The other way would be using Inventor and iLogic. So you could use a custom property, and you could call it actual length plus runout. And you could use iLogic or even just the equation editor inside in the parameter table. And you could always say that your parameter, which is your length plus runout, is always equal to the parameter, which is actual length, multiplied by 1.1. So that'll always give you a 10% greater runout. As well, if you're using cable and harness for cables, you can round up cable length to the nearest meter if you like, and the same with the tube and pipe environment within Inventor. So it depends kind of on the CAD application really. The only way in Vault to do it would be manually changing it in the bill of materials that I just showed you. Okay, I hope that answered that question, and I'll give it another minute or so just for people to have a chance to put in a question. Okay, so that looks pretty much like we've tidied it up for the day in terms of questions. So that's pretty much it for the webcast today. So thank you very much, guys, for your attention today. I know you take time out of your busy day, and I really appreciate you spending some time finding out a bit about Autodesk Vault. If you do want to find out more about it, don't hesitate to contact us here at A2K. We can do a scoping meeting to look at your individual processes, what you do, and what you want to get out of Vault, and then we can tailor a solution to your particular need. Okay, thanks again, guys, for your time, and we'll see you next time.
The